get my pen to write down the time of when we're starting. Welcome back to the MMcast Masters of Modern podcast. I am your spooky boy, Kess S. Pumpkins, known as Alex Kessler. We're here with my co-host, dancing skeleton, Ben Bateman.
New spooky. We're not even there. We're not at the dumb voices, the Halloween voices. That'll come later. This is preview time.
This is preview time. This is Innistrad. We're going to Innistrad. It's its own thing. That's another Davis S. Pumpkins reference. But I'm super hyped. We just got a bunch of information today from what the mechanics are going to be, what's going on with Midnight Hunt. Not anything from the second one. I think it's not the Sacred Vow, but the Vampire Wedding set that comes immediately afterwards. One of us should look that up, of what it's called. And we got a bunch of mechanics, and just like it reminded me of how much I love, like absolutely adore Innistrad. I think, and in fact, the name of this episode that you're seeing both in the thumbnail and below me is going to be Innistrad is the best Magic plane of all time, and it's not close.
I mean, it's also, well, there's a lot of, first of all, it's called Innistrad Crimson Vow is the one you're talking about, where it looks like Liliana is probably marrying Soren.
No. It's Olivia is marrying a Markov. There is, well, we're going to talk about that in a second, but heavy debate on which Markov, but we'll get there. I meant to say
Olivia, but yes, that is what it looks like on the packaging that we've seen so far. But getting back to your point a second ago about Innistrad being the best plane, couldn't agree more. There are a couple that are close for me that I really like. There are a few planes that I think that hold a candle, that I think we've seen enough depth, and I enjoy the design a lot. But when it comes to Magic and what Magic is and was supposed to be, I think that Innistrad is the closest thing to the original Dungeons and Dragons vibe, while still doing something entirely different. The horror, thematic stuff, where you still can have demons, and you can have ghouls, and you can have zombies, and you can have vampires, and you can have all these cool creatures that feel like, it almost feels like everything significant that you could ever want out of Magic actually fits comfortably into an Innistrad design. Because if you tell me that you have like spooky, creepy elves, or you have spooky, creepy merfolk, or like literally anything, I go, sure, yeah, that makes sense. Give me some horror theme with like blood dripping on the windows of literally any of that, and it works for me.
Even though none of those, it's interesting because like elves, merfolk, because I would say it's pretty far from D&D in the sense of creature types, right? There's no goblins on Innistrad. There's no merfolk. There's no elves. Like other than vampires and zombies, like it's missing a lot of those key like creature types, and great.
I think what I mean when I say that, because yes, correct. I mean, my point in saying that was it exists in its own world. It is fully its own world, but it's that world that you're living in that does feel like it's so adjacent and fits so well alongside the original Magic mythos. That's why I think it works so well. It doesn't feel like I'm playing in this new world, this Bionic world, or this Blade Runner world for a set, and I'm going to see how I like it. It feels like I'm still doing Magic's core thing, but in a totally different way. And each time they go back to it, it feels like they build on that.
Right. Like nothing on Ixalan couldn't be on Dominaria.
Yes.
Nothing on even Mirrodin really couldn't be on Dominaria. Nothing on, I mean, like it'd have to be like the future of Dominaria. That one's maybe the most different, though also based on a lot of Dominaria based mythos, right? They're pretty integrally linked. So like, I agree. Like Innistrad has its own vibe. It's its own thing. It's totally different than other worlds. I also just like it's cool. Zombies and vampires. There's a reason that like this stuff is so transcendent across so many genres that like it just keeps hitting well. And like, yeah, I guess you're saying like other sets that come close. Ravnica's the closest.
Yeah, Ravnica's got a lot of depth. I feel like but the thing that's interesting about this is that I wonder when we start to get into our second, because compare Ravnica City of Guilds and Ravnica Block to Innistrad Block, and that's one conversation. But the full breadth of multiple blocks and going back there and what's happened, I think, is a different conversation. Because the first time you get any Magic set, it's a very different experience than when you go back. Like, for instance, Battle for Zendikar is like it's like hard for me to even remember the set in a lot of ways compared to how I feel about the original Zendikar, because it's such a fail compared to the original Zendikar, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, continue.
So I do think that like Ravnica's close. I think some of that metallic, like cybernetic, sunbursty stuff that Mirrodin and the new Phyrexia and all those sets did, that's really fun. I really like that stuff a lot. When they do a good job with that stuff, it's some of the most satisfying, I think. For me, that's probably the closest is the Mirrodin stuff.
Yeah, Mirrodin's really cool. Yeah, I think like contenders are Zendikar, Mirrodin, Ravnica, Innistrad, Theros. The ones that have major returns. I think there's some sets that if we got good returns of them could be up there. Like Khans, or like Tarkir to me is up there as like one of my favorite locations. Ikoria could be in the future if we go back a few times. But like, I don't know, like Innistrad, like, and some of its power level, like we're going to go over in a bit, just like the gluttony of powerful, like all-time best cards all come from this plane. But I like the stories. I know people like really didn't click a lot. There's a chunk of people that like really adversely clicked with Shadows over Innistrad, but I think that's like one of my favorite story blocks of all time. Like, and I'm not a body horror person. Like, like that part does get rough. I think the scariest thing that's ever happened in Magic is Brazilla. The story where that happens is like terrifying. But like on the other hand, like that mystery and the way that buildup happened, and like Emrakul being the like big reveal at the end of that set, and the Hiri's revenge storyline was so cool that like, yeah, I don't know. And just like, and I'm excited to see what they do next. I'm like, there's a reason that there's so much stuff to do on Innistrad. What's wild to me about what's about to happen is that when Innistrad was first pitched, no one believed it would work. That's the reason that Innistrad only had 2 sets, and then Avacyn Restored was this kind of soft reboot in the middle of the block, was that they didn't think there was enough depth to like horror tropes to bring into Magic. And now 2 revisits later, there's so much stuff that they want to do that we're going to get we're getting 2 sets. They're doing both the Crimson Vow and Midnight Haunt because they realize that there's like 2 entire sets worth of content that they like couldn't just hold into one set, which I think is like kind of proof of pudding of like how great it is. Like it's a deeper well than they even thought it was. And you can see that, like the fact that it is like the vampire aristocrat plane. It's the witches and ghosts and zombies plane. It's the werewolf plane. Like just the fall vibes of werewolves versus witches that it already looks like we're getting out of Midnight Haunt is super cool.
It is. Okay, so that's interesting you bring that up, because if this is going to be a quick sort of comp, but earlier today when we're recording this, the trailer for Wheel of Time came out, and it's very reminiscent of Game of Thrones, which is very reminiscent in a lot of ways to Lord of the Rings, and these are all the classic. This stuff feels like it's much closer to the D&D original Magic design. But then you also have the sort of YA trends that pick up every few years of vampires and werewolves and zombies and various different shows and things that play in that world. Now,
True Blood versus Underworld versus Twilight versus, yeah. Yes,
they're distinctly 2 different feels, but they're both very trendy and both very popular in their own way. And they cycle in and out of being like the thing in the zeitgeist at that moment. If you had to compare those 2 vibes, Spooky Pumpkins versus Swords and Dragons, which do you like better?
Spooky Pumpkins?
100%, and it's not even close. If you take all of the history of all of it.
So like Spooky Pumpkins is weird, right? Because like Spooky Pumpkins to me also includes Stranger Things, and it includes like Scream, and it includes Nightmare Before Christmas. Like when you get all of that in, Spooky Pumpkins. If you're just talking like YA fantasy, vampires, werewolves genre versus all of the other fantasy, then all of other fantasy, right? Like I'd rather like have Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings than Twilight or Underworld or
sure.
And, like Underworld's underrated, but like Underworld and True Blood, but like because you also get all the zombie, like you get Walking Dead, but you also get like all of the other good zombie content out there. I don't know. There's like a lot of good.
I think, I mean, the biggest difference between the 2 of them, that is, by and large, one of them plays usually in a contemporary space where you have contemporary characters fending off of horrors, and the other one usually plays in some medieval sort of space where it's a different world, and you know you're drinking stew and mead.
It's surprising how little urban fantasy has become popular. Like True Blood and Twilight are kind of some of the best examples where it's like, yeah, like there isn't a lot of. Because in literature, there's a lot, right? There's some pretty good book series of modern day, like noir detectives hunting down vampires and fairies and like fairy gangsters or elf whatever. There's like that like really bad Will Smith movie on Netflix written by that the guy that sucks.
Max Landis.
Yeah, Max Landis. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing that like that has never really happened. But fantasy from the Innistrad perspective brought into modern day times is like everywhere. I think part of that is holiday focused. There's like a yearly moment where Halloween happens, and that's when spooky stuff comes out, and it's often layered into modern day times. Versus there's not like Christmas is the closest to fantasy, classic fantasy, like where like elves are in Christmas, right? Like they're a different type of elf, but like magic and all of that stuff in modern day times, the closest I can think of is Christmas and as a holiday.
But all of this to say, it gets us back to the initial conversation of why was Innistrad so popular. And I think the reason probably it was so popular is because when it catches, when that thing we're talking about catches, it's extremely marketable, and it's close to people's hearts. People really buy into it. So I think that I also think one thing we're not acknowledging, and this is very important, and we'll talk about this because we're going to preview some cards here in a second, is that I think the design of the original Innistrad set of the first
correct
one, more so even than Dark Ascension, but the design of the first Innistrad set is some of the most fun, most elegant design that Magic has ever had. Like you talk about the quality of like just a card like Bloodline Keeper, which is such a bomb and limited that became obviously a very played card in Commander, but like just like the design of the card Bloodline Keeper, it's such a fun, cool Magic card. It represents what it's trying to do so well. Or Spider Spawning, like those are cards that just feel awesome to play.
I think one of the reasons is that it is a relatively untapped in gameplay mechanical space that's super resonant, right? There's like a ton. Now there's like a bunch like zombie games and stuff, but there's like it's very easy to tell stories in games that resonate with horror genre tropes versus other stuff that exists that you can bring in. So I think that's part of it. And yeah, I agree. I think part of the reason Innistrad is one of the best planes in the world is that first set kicked it out of the park. There's not that much story to the original Innistrad block, right? It's like Liliana is living there, decides that like, oh, stuff is bad, and and finds out that her like one of her demon contractors is in the Hell Vault, and she's like, oh, I just had to get someone who believes in this to open it. Thalia, I'm going to murder all these people unless you open it. Thalia opens it. Grizzlebrand and all the angels like Avacyn are in there, and Nahiri is in there, and that's the set, right? Like, it's not like the groundbreaking story, like, compared to other stories, compared to the Shadows of Innistrad story, it's like nothing happens. But the world is so cool, and the mechanics are so cool, and Flashback is like such an integral part, and the madness following that, which I think are two of the best like mechanics Magic has made. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's like a perfect amalgamation of vibe, mechanic, draft, limited format, story, world, characters, tribes. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that, to me, there's sort of three pieces of understanding and appreciating Magic flavor. There's the person who just reads the cards and has no attachment to the pictures, to any of it. It's just like, this card is worth this many points. There's the middle, which is, I think, kind of more like where I am, which is I do like when cards feel a certain way or interactions feel a certain way. There's a cleverness to that stuff that attracts me to the game. The art attracts me to the game. I like in limited formats or in modern getting to play a tribe or something like that. Like, I do relate to that. And then there's the people who are very aware of the story and they like what you just talked about. Like, we've talked about story plenty of times. We have actually on this show, and I know more about Magic's story now than I ever would have if we hadn't done a podcast about it, because I never paid attention to that stuff. Mm-hmm. But like, it is a resonant part of the game for you and many other people, where knowing what the cards represent and how they play into the greater novel that you're playing, not reading, you're actually in that story, is important. And I do think that Innistrad's one of the most successful sets ever for that middle category, where it achieves attracting me to some part of the flavor of the game without needing to read a story. I just like the cards. They're cool. They look cool. They feel cool.
Speaking of which, and we're going to get to the next subject matter, but before we do, we are at the part of every podcast where we are going to make you do some trivia. So the way this works, it's a nice weekly game of MMcast trivia. Basically, what you're betting is alike. If I'm going to ask a question, Ben is going to try answering it. If he gets it, and you are going to try answering the time he takes to answer it. If you get it right, you don't have to do anything. You win. Congratulations. And the way you guess is you have to comment below. So you comment your answer below, and then if it's right, you're good. Don't worry about it. If you're wrong, you have to hit that like button. If you got it right and you want to hit that like button, we appreciate it. But if you get it wrong and you just don't know the answer, sorry, you have to hit the like button. That's the rules. By listening to me say this out loud to you, you've signed up for it. Too bad. And that's how this is going to work. And so, Ben.
Yes.
On the card Imprisoned in the Moon, which, if you don't know, it's 2 blue, enchantment aura, enchant creature, land, or planeswalker. Enchant permanent is a colorless land with tap, add colorless to your mana pool, and loses all other abilities and types, lose all other card types and abilities. It is representing Emrakul being locked in the moon. 2 planeswalkers are doing that. 2 of the planeswalkers in the Magic story are locking Emrakul into the moon. One of them is Tamio. Who's the second? It's in the artwork.
Oh, jeez. Imprisoned in the Moon. So this isn't a Innistrad set.
This was the major finale moment to Eldritch Moon, the second set in Shadows over Innistrad. This is like the big ending.
That sounds about right. I'm going to ask for my one. Repeat the question.
In the card art for Imprisoned in the Moon, which depicts the very finale moment of Emrakul being locked in the moon on the end of Eldritch Moon, Shadows over Innistrad block, 2 planeswalkers are being shown in the artwork putting Emrakul into the moon. One of them is Tamio. The other one is whom?
Who's the other planeswalker in Eldritch Moon? You got 3 mana, 3 color Tamio. You got like, is it Liliana?
Nope.
Is it Arlencord?
Nope. This is a little bit of a trick question because I do not believe this planeswalker shows up in either set or has not shown up on an Innistrad set as a card. No.
Doesn't Venser die somewhere around there?
Venser dies at the end of New Phyrexia. In New Phyrexia, he teleports his heart into Karn's chest along with his spark to save him.
Who's the one that gets ripped? Oh, Gideon? He gets ripped apart?
No. It's. Do you want me to just tell you the answer?
Yes.
It's Nissa.
Oh man, I kind of thought Nissa for a second, but I was like, that's just the wrong set. That's nowhere near.
Mm-hmm. It's when the Gatewatch was doing stuff. So like Gatewatch members would be on sets, but not necessarily. It's her symbol on the moon. She's like using her like ties to the land to be able to put something inside of a celestial body, as Tamio is using book magic. All right,
guys. Well, I have to apologize for whiffing on that one. If you guys knew it, good for you, and I hope your comments right. If you didn't hit that like button, that trivia segment brought to you this week by TCG Player. And TCG Player, you guys can find, we actually have a code. You guys can get cards at TCG Player. They're an awesome partner here to the podcast.
Just click the link below.
To click the link below. If you do want to get some cards, if you have a pre-order set, or if you honestly just want to build a deck or something like that, it's very helpful for us if you use that affiliate code. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the show every single week. And I apologize for missing that trivia question.
You don't have to apologize. I'm trying to come up with stuff that would stump you, and that was story related and Innistrad related. It was a hard one. I wasn't firing off with the easy trivia questions. If you got it right, like hats off, because that's a little bit more. It's a deep cut. It's a famous card though.
It's like the equivalent of when I spin family films in the Schmodown, and I'm like, I'm never gonna get this. Like maybe there's a story question I'll get right, but it's that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the next thing we want to talk about today is one of the reasons that I think Innistrad is as resonant as it is and as big of a deal as it is power level. Right. These 4 sets collectively, or 5 sets collectively, have contributed such a high level of playable modern cards that I was astounded when I was like reading through it. And like, I think the worst card I have on this list, maybe it's Vexing Devil, maybe it's Invisible Stalker. That's kind of like the bottom of the barrel. And even if you got rid of like a few of those and just like things that I know for a fact have like top 8 at a tournament, you're at 60 total cards. And I've definitely missed some. So I have 62 here, 60 total cards of modern staples. So these are like the fact that they had such a large influence on this format is kind of astounding. And we're not even like not all of these cards, like it's deep, right? Like, yes, you have Snapcaster Mage and you have Liliana the Veil, right? Like those are obvious like staples, but like a lot of sets have cards at that level. But like Faithless Looting, Grave Crawler, Champion of the Parish, Blood Artist, Duskwatch Recruiter, like even Mayor of Averbruck has top 8'd Magic tournaments when it was in Humans. Thalia, like in contention to being better than Stoneforge Mystic, is from this set. Thing in the Ice, Geist of Saint Traft, Laboratory Maniac, Prized Amalgam, Spell Queller. Like, I can just keep going. Tireless Tracker, Master of the Fells, Restoration Angel, Bedlam Reveler, Craterhoof Behemoth, and then like Grizzlebrand and Emrakul, right? Like, these are like
just capping it off with like basically the 2 best resurrection targets ever, or cheat into play win targets, I should say.
Emrakul the Promised End, not Emrakul the Aeon's Torn.
Yeah, good call, because that's Eldrazi.
But like, still, like a card that sees play. Like, this list is, when I like was going through it, I was like, oh yeah, like every flashback card comes in Modern comes from Innistrad. There's like
also,
2.
Did you mention like Grimflayer and also the second Liliana, right?
I skipped a bunch of cards. Like Insolent Neonite, Mausoleum Warbirth, Thraben Inspector, Vexing Devil, like Grimflayer, Rattle Change, Selfless Spirit, Thalia's Lieutenant, Field Hunter, Geralt's Messenger. I'm just now listing every card I have here. Tireless Tracker, Bellringer, Haunted Dead, Huntmaster of the Fells, Sigarda, Zealous Conscript, Bedlam Reveler.
I miss the days when Huntmaster was just like the card. That card was so sweet.
Yep.
That's like it's got to be one of my favorite Magic cards.
It's like $10, right? And by the way, that was just the creatures. We haven't talked about spells like Faithless Looting, Goldcaller's Bell, Grafdigger's Cage, Thought Scour, Traverse the Uvenwald, Collected Brutality, Intangible Virtue, Stony Silence, Eldritch Evolution, Gnaw to the Bone, Liliana the Last Hope, Lingering Souls, Nahiri the Harbinger, Past in Flames, Sorin Lord of Innistrad, The Other Sorin, Unburial Rights, Terminus, and then the lands of Cavern of Souls, Desolate Lighthouse, and Gavany Township.
Jeez. That's insane. I mean, like that's so many like significant cards. I've played almost every single card you just named was in my Highlander 600.
Yeah,
they're almost all in there.
Yeah. I skipped like weird EDH cards, right? Because there's like I didn't talk about Deadeye Navigator or the Gitrog monster or Mercaeus or Avacyn or Heartless Summoning or like Runechanter's Pike, Anguished Unmaking, Parallel Lives. Like, just the value of owning cards. Blasphemous Act is from this set. The most played red board wipe of all time.
So sweet.
Well, yeah, it is. I'm going to stick to that statement. Like, and then it gets farther. Like, you have like stuff like Harvest Pyre that seemed like play maybe a couple times as like a cool Boros Reckoner combo. Like, it's wild. It's wild when I was going through these sets. Like, ignore the limited format, ignore the vibe. If you want to talk purely about your Pro Tour lovin', numbers are the only thing that matter, and I care about the stats of every card. Innistrad is one of the heaviest hitter worlds in Magic. Like, now, some sets that are really popular are hurt here, right? Because the problem with the Ravnica sets is gold cards are more limited. But when we were doing our top 10 gold cards, until Edgewitch Moon, most of them sucked.
Yeah.
There was like 3 good ones from all of Return to Ravnica and Regular Ravnica, even including like Golgari. Like, yeah, it was wild when we were doing that. There's like, oh yeah, there's like not that many. At best, you could do a top 5 that's like an actual without like with a serious face. And then like,
do you think that, non sequitur that relates to this idea? You and I have done this show together now for 7 years, I think. Mm-hmm. I think we started at the end of 2014, the fall of 2014. So yeah, we're hitting 7 years pretty soon. And the first 2 years had a lot of top 10 lists. We did like a whole bunch of top 10 green cards, top 10 blue cards, all that type of stuff, right? And we would do like top 10 creatures and sometimes. But it's been so many years since we've done that. And we had that whole episode like 2 weeks ago about so much of the powerful stuff now in Modern has been printed in the last 2 years. I wonder if we were to do a top 10 list today, starting that project over, if those lists would look drastically different. If those lists would be like, I'll bet you those lists would be 50% or more different than they were.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you compared, honestly, it would be hilarious on some level to go back and do a reaction episode to like 1 or 2 of those, just to be like, what were things like in 2016?
You know what you do? We do what we did for the very first. So when we first started doing those top 10 episodes, it was in coordination with the Command Zone, and Jimmy would come on and Jimmy would do his countdown of the top 10 commander cards. And then we would do the top 10, like he'd do top 10 commander blue cards, and we would do our own top 10 commander or modern blue cards and then compare how they go. We could do that same format, but we'd use the original list.
Yeah.
Count down from the original list and then do modern day ones. I probably want to figure out a model that was able to do like 2 colors an episode or 2 color combos an episode, maybe, because like I think doing a full episode per color all over again, like we never finished the 2 color combos.
I know.
That
Well,
just
and
never
also
happened.
now the episodes that we do are so much more focused on like, you know, topical, like, and there's set reviews. Like we wouldn't get through stuff very easily. It's just like an interesting conversation because I just feel like things have changed so much.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it would be cool to do that. Yeah, so like there's like I haven't even mentioned like Temporal Mastery and Splendid, like the Miracles list.
Right.
Just Miracle cards in general, like messed up legacy. And like the like tournament, I think part of it was also the standards around Innistrad were both really popular. I think standard like Scars of Mirrodin Innistrad standard was like super really cool with stuff like Frights where you were like reanimating Elish Norns, and Thragfire existed, and then this into Theros also had some really cool stuff. Just like, the worlds of these eras were like, or no, this into Ravnica, right? It was kind of sandwiched between 2 other very popular moments in Magic. In fact, like one of the best probably 5 years in Magic history, right? Going from Scars of like really Zendikar into Scars of Mirrodin, into Innistrad, into Ravnica, into Theros, into Khan's Block is like a wild like run. That's like a pretty insane Magic set run. I don't think Wizards has done it since then. There hasn't been a hitter after hitter after heater moment since that moment.
Did you just pivot from hitter to heater in the same phrase there?
I did.
I feel like you did.
I did. Yeah. It hit on heater after heater after heater.
Yeah,
there you go. There you go.
I feel like, I don't know, Universal, there's like universal sort of appeal to certain sets. And then there's ones that, you know, like for instance, you've talked a couple times about how Theros, the first Theros deck you love. I've never been a fan of the first Theros.
I don't like Theros.
Oh, but people do. I thought.
Yeah. Theros was very, very, very popular, right? Like I agree with you personally. I love, but I do love Journey in the Nyx. Like
okay.
What I don't like is Aura Heroic.
Yeah, right.
Monstrous. That version of it, I'm not a fan of. But the standard set from that environment wasn't that bad. I liked
Constellation's sweet. They just didn't use it very much.
Correct. That's why I like really love Theros Beyond Death, actually. Like I think that set's really cool. If I were to pick one of these sets, that's the one I would pick. Yeah, I like and all these cards are cool and they like are powerful, but they're powerful in interesting ways. I don't know. And the graveyard's my favorite place to hang out. Mechanically, I think the graveyard's one of the coolest places in Magic, and it's like a very popular space, right? There's a reason that Flashback, they kind of like joke that every mechanic is kicker.
Yeah,
but like
right.
30% of mechanics are Flashback. There's 2 flashback mechanics in this set. There's flashback and then there's the new mechanic. So like
Disturb, yeah.
Right. There's Disturb, and then there's Aftermath, and then there's Overgrow. Yeah, there's like so many different options for that. So yeah, I think I like the power level of Innistrad sets are insane, and I'm hoping this continues. Like I think if these 2 sets are good, it just totally cements Innistrad as the best set, and the hype around it. Like people are just so stoked to like go back to it in a way that people kind of weren't for Zendikar.
I mean, I didn't care.
Like Zendikar is a weird set because I think Zendikar, the first one, is more popular due to it just being the first Magic set a lot of people played.
Yeah, and also there's the big factor of that, which is that we had fetch lands in Standard, and that was a big deal. We got new fetch lands. Like that was it mattered to people for a lot of reasons at the time. It mattered because it was exciting. They were worth money. You pulled them from packs. It mattered because enemy color tends to be as popular, or if not more popular, than allied colors very often in terms of just people's favorites. And it mattered because the value of that set long term was quite high because of the fact that you had fetch lands. Like that, I really think that one factor pushed the original Zendikar very high in a way that I don't necessarily know that it would have otherwise.
And I think there's a lot of things that just like other sets have done now. Like vampires being a major supported tribe was a first thing there, right? And and that was really cool. I think that's one thing we haven't really talked about Innistrad too, is like I wish Ixalan was like Innistrad. And when I say that, like they have very similar bases of start, right? Like it's iconic imagery, right? Dinosaurs, pirates, etc. versus horror stuff. Like there's a lot of content there. You have loose tribal, I think they like were trying too hard to do 5 different tribes, and they were like not remembering how Innistrad work. I wish they looked at Innistrad more when making Ixalan as like how we should do tribal, not like try and do something a little bit different where there's like no removal and like stuff isn't grindy, but like more just like having the tribes being represented in the way that they were. Because I think Innistrad does what Ixalan failed at.
Yeah.
Really well. It like takes tribal, but doesn't make the set feel too tribally. And Ixalan was like, oh, we're going to do dinosaur, merfolk, vampire, and pirate tribal, but then like doesn't.
I do think though, because I remember where you and I were, we were on a sales trip together when they announced Ixalan. And I remember the hype that you and I had. But the interesting thing about that is that it speaks to what I was talking about. And it's exactly the opposite, where it's just it being a set about dinosaurs, which was that was the excitement, right? It was like dinosaurs and pirates. I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome.
Sure.
That wasn't enough to make that a good set. Just it being around those things. The design of the set, the power level of the set wasn't up to snuff. So it's a good reminder that just because you have a cool theme for a set doesn't mean the set's going to work or be beloved, right? Like it takes more than that for this stuff to work. And I think that's the ultimate point we're making here was you could have a great vampire set. You could have a not great vampire set. They've just hit over and over again with the themes in Innistrad.
Yeah, it's almost that like it didn't have a mechanical direction, right? That's, I think, the thing that Ixalan was missing. Innistrad has a really cool vibe and the graveyard as a mechanical direction. And honestly, the other contenders here, like Ravnica has a very cool thing of like the vibe of the place, like where everyone has their guild and they have like each guild has their own vibe, but they also have the gold color pairs as a mechanical space. And even Theros has enchantments as their mechanical space, and then Greek mythology. And Phyrexia has like the Mirren body horror techno future stuff, and then artifacts as a mechanic. And what Ixalan was really missing was like that. And like it, Zendikar has lands. Like it almost like wanted to be a land set. Like they almost needed it to be Zendikar 2 and like really lean into like having a second location where land mechanics work, because that makes sense, right? And they already did that. They almost did it anyways with the double-faced explore enchantments. That like on one side we're an enchantment, on the other side we're a land. If I would say if I were to go back to Ixalan, I would love for them to have the double-faced land cards there.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that would have fit. It would have made a lot of sense. Take the Zendikar land theme. I'm fine. Zendikar is cool. We can go back there. There's a lot of other tropes of Zendikar to lean into, but I think Ixalan should be a second. Same, like we have 2 artifact sets. We have Phyrexia and Kaladesh. I think you could have 2 land theme sets, and that could be Ixalan and Zendikar. Yeah, I agree. I think that was one of the most distinctive parts of that version of Zendikar, and I think it would have added a lot to Ixalan. But so I know, obviously,
I don't think tribal is enough, I guess is my point. Because I think every plane should have some tribal mechanics, and they do, right? Like Theros has tribal stuff. You have tribal stuff on Zendikar. Like Zendikar, a big part of it is core, ally, vampire, and goblin and merfolk tribal, right? They have 5 tribes or 4 tribes and then a sliver faction. Yeah, I don't know. And Innistrad does too, right? Okay. So let's do the last piece of for today's or the next part, unless you want to say anything else on power level.
No, I was literally going to say, I mean, I think my comment is that the power level of the set, the design of the power level is perfect. It's one of the most balanced and exactly in the correct side of powerful that I think you can get in Magic, which is probably why it's so popular and why I think we like it so much. But they've previewed a handful of cards, so I think we wanted to talk about some previews, which I think what you were getting to. And
okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is the new set. Is we have 2 sets coming out: Midnight Haunt and Crimson Vow, and then that's being followed by the Innistrad double feature, which is like they're taking cards from both sets and making it a co-draftable format where they're all in one pack. I think like.
With only the new sets, or they're reprinting the old Zendikar?
Just cards from the 2 new sets. So I think what they realized is that because Magic players are who we are, that there was going to be a moment where we were going to start drafting the 2 sets together. And they made 2 decisions. One, they were like, oh, this maybe isn't good, right? There's no way to balance this out correctly. And 2, let's make money off of that. And so they're releasing kind of boxes you can buy that'll be draft formatable packs that have both sets mixed together. It's kind of like what would happen if they had a 400 card Innistrad set. So I'm really excited by that. That sounds really fun. But the first set comes out. We just got a bunch of stuff from that. We don't have a lot from Crimson Vow. As you mentioned before, what we know so far is Crimson Vow is about a vampire wedding. It's going to be much more about the vampires than this set is. It probably, I think like from a story perspective, this set is going to deal with more of the ramifications of like Emrakul being trapped in the moon. And we know that already. Like, and like basically the story is starting like the moon is like, basically it's moving slower. And so like night is just lasting a lot longer. Emrakul's having more of an ability to slow down what the moon is doing. And therefore, like all of the monsters have more time out, right? The humans have less time where they're able to go out, which is making them more powerful. Teferi is literally showing up onto the set because he's like the time wizard. So he's trying to help deal with the time of the fact that the moon is lasting longer in the sky, which is a loose explanation, but fine. We got a bunch of mechanics revealed today. The first one is Flashback is back, and I can't be more excited.
Classic Flashback is back, and it's called Flashback, which is significant because there's been, as you mentioned, Aftermath and Embalm and what's the other one that they did in Theros Beyond Death?
Escape.
Yeah, I mean so we've done that sort of different kinds of things coming out of the graveyard so many times on Earth, but this is traditional Flashback, which is just nice. I mean, I've always loved Flashback, and it's also the most evergreen graveyard set, like graveyard thing, which I feel like they don't use. They get close to overusing, but they don't overuse. It's always exciting when it comes back, right?
I'd be fine if they always use it. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I think that there is just something so great about it's like one of the things I like when playing Shadows of Innistrad, when it was being previewed, I felt it was missing. In hindsight, looking back on those two sets, I like really appreciate them. I think they're also very great in their own way. But while playing them, even I was like, oh man, I wish Flashback was in this set. The mechanic that I liked the most in a lot of ways were those zombies that kind of had pseudo flashback attached to them, or Griff's Boon, right? The like white mana enchantment that lets something gain flying out of the graveyard, because it kind of had flashback. And so like being able to play with that type of mechanic where you can like self-mill and put stuff in your graveyard so that you can cast spells from your graveyard and gain value that way is like my favorite way of playing Magic, and a limited format that lets you do that is like perfection. So I'm really hyped.
Yeah, I think the thing you just talked about is one of the pieces probably of. So in Magic's original like design, like when it first came out, that thing you're talking about was not a part of the game, where you could take advantage on some level of discarding cards, and your graveyard was available to you as a resource. There was a few things that they did, like the original Nether Shadow, I think it's
there were some creatures that also like Reanimate and Animate Dead were like in Magic pretty early on in
Animate Dead's an original card. Reanimate's Tempest, though. I mean, that's still a few years in. I'm talking like the original.
There were Animate Dead variants like throughout that period, right? Like they're
for sure. But even that's like you're still targeting something that got into your graveyard. The original Magic, like the first two sets, they don't really have convenient ways for you to profit in marginal ways off of discarding cards.
Sure.
So like that was the thing that happened later. Now it's such an understood part of the game that I think when a new player learns Magic and they understand how to do it, they are so much more intrinsically aware of like getting a marginal value by looting, like by putting a card into your graveyard or self-milling. That's not just losing a card from your hand or your deck. That's like you're seeing more things, you're getting more options, you have more play. So you're not drawing a card per se, but is it worth 25% of a card to loot?
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, that's like. Yeah, you feel really smart when you discard a flashback card.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
You're just like you feel great. So then the next mechanic that is kind of a return, kind of isn't, is Daybound and Nightbound. And basically what this is they've keyworded the werewolf mechanic from the original Innistrad set and the second one. The like if you cast one spell a turn, if you cast no spells a turn, they flip over to nighttime because everyone's gone to sleep, and if you cast 2 spells a turn, they'll flip back to Daybound. And I think what's really interesting is because they've keyworded it, they're now doing more cute stuff with being able to work around it and being able to use those words. Like whenever it becomes Daybound, you draw a card. You can now have triggered effects based on it. And it's interesting how they've like, it feels like someone realized that you can't be Daybound or Nightbound unless everyone's Daybound and Nightbound. It's something that I haven't figured out how they're going to deal with. Like, what happens if I cast a card and it's nightbound right now. I don't think that's totally been explained to me, and I'm hoping maybe the comments can walk me through that.
You're essentially saying that somebody figured out that if my werewolf is transforming based in the old words before we had the words daybound and nightbound, if it was transforming because I didn't play any spells, then in theory that's supposed to represent nighttime. But it needs to be nighttime for all of us. Otherwise, flavorfully, it doesn't make any sense.
So I am reading there. That is the big change. Is if it is night, permanents enter the battlefield nightbound. So they do. If you cast a werewolf and it's night, it will enter on its backside. So they've made it now so like things stay on the right side. So they do function slightly different than older werewolves do. But it is an interesting differentiation between what was and is now.
But that doesn't retcon the old werewolves.
I don't believe, unless we get some retcons added. So that does mean that it's unlikely we're going to get any reprints from the old Magic sets.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. No Mare of Aberbrook in this one. Sad face.
So we might get like Governor of Avonbrook.
Yeah, that's probably. If he doesn't cost 2, I'll be upset.
Though, did you see the legendary creature? Because this guy's dope. This is a big, like, for those who don't know, like when Wizards designed Innistrad, Commander was not a major focus. They like knew you wanted legendary creatures to lead the different tribes, and they had a mythic legendary gold card for each of them, but it wasn't such a major focus that they like made sure they had it. And they did not print a legendary red-green werewolf card. It just didn't exist in the first set because there was Garrick, which kind of fit that flip card mythic space. And they just like didn't do it. And then when they got to the next set, they did Huntmaster of the Fells. And the problem is at the time they were too worried about flip cards being difficult for people to understand and didn't want to accidentally have Huntmaster of the Fells like players playing one side and then the other side being on the other side, so they don't legendary rule each other out correctly. So it would be like kind of weird for a second and be confusing. So they were afraid of it, so they didn't make it legendary.
Yeah, it is funny that when you go back and you look at that set, that basically the big things that are missing primarily, I think it's the legendary werewolf, and then you don't have of the 2-color lords, the uncommon ones that you had, Diagraph Captain.
You don't have a human.
Yeah, there wasn't the green-white one that was like cost 3 or cost 2 or whatever. It was like that person.
Humans get +1/+1 in vigilance or something. Yeah. That didn't exist either.
So weird. Those are the two I remember.
So the interesting thing about but then we go back, right? We go back and start Innistrad and be like, okay, everyone, don't worry. We have the red-green legendary werewolf. We got you. And it sucked.
Oh, right.
It was like maybe it was more of a plant to see play in standard, but it like literally was like, it felt like it was designed by someone who had no idea how either, like it wasn't good in standard. It was bad there too. And it wasn't a good commander. And it didn't matter tribally. It was just like a fight card that flipped. I'm like not even remembering what it did.
What it is, right? Was it like a 5-drop or something like that?
I'm hoping Marshall's putting it up. I'm looking it up now. It is Ulrich of the Crawlin Horde. 3 red-green, 4/4 human werewolf legendary creature. When this creature enters the battlefield or transforms into Ulrich of the Crawlin Horde, target creature gets so whenever it transforms, target creature gets +4/+4. And then at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform it. And then the other side is when this creature transforms into Ulrich Alpha, you may have it fight. Target non-werewolf creature you don't control.
Yes, I remember this card. I remember. Not only do I remember this card, but I remember reading this card, and then I remember thinking this card is garbage, and it turned out to be garbage.
It's kind of when Wizards was thinking like trying to make fight happen. Not that fight isn't still a thing that happens, but it was more of a like, no, this is going to be a big thing in Constructed, and it was like, no, it's not. There's just better removal spells.
It is interesting that fight never really they wanted it to be Green's removal, and it never really caught on because it was not appealing. Honestly, I think about fight and it is annoying to me because it feels so often like what's going to happen is I'm going to go about doing it. And you're going to pump your creature in response, and I'm going to get blown out.
When fight is bad, it's terrible, and when it's good, it's mediocre.
yeah, for sure.
and sometimes it's decent. So like then we got Ulrich of the Crawling Horde. So then this set we now have Travalar Dire Overlord, which not only is it a good commander, I think it's like just in generally very powerful card. So when wolf or werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So you have all werewolves and wolves have draw a card effect, which is not irrelevant because there's a lot of wolf tokens in Magic as well. And then if you flip it, it then flips into Tavalar, the Midnight Scourge, which is a 4/4 versus a 3/3, and then has that same whenever a werewolf or a wolf does damage, draw a card, and then it has Kessig Wolfren on it. So its second ability is like not only from a perspective of power level, where like one of the reasons it's really good to have mana sinks on werewolves is because when it's nighttime, you don't want to cast 2 spells a turn. So you want stuff to spend your mana on, both to make it nighttime and also once you're in nighttime to keep it there. But also, Kessig Wolfren is like super flavorful. It's where all the werewolves come from. My name's literally in the middle of it. And also still has the card draw effect that is also better because you can give a creature trample and +X/+0, so you're guaranteed to hit.
Yeah, this is definitely a pretty serious power upgrade in terms of the last legendary red-green, and it also feels flavorfully, like you said, like it fits alongside some of the stuff that we saw in the first one. This card also makes me feel like there's a decent chance that like some kind of werewolfy deck ends up being a thing, maybe, possibly. Yep. I mean, for sure in standard, but if it keeps getting developed, it doesn't feel like we'd be that far from a modern version because Mare of Aberbrook has been played in humans as the 2-drop before, and it's quite good. So this card interacting with it, I think probably there is a version of that deck that'll end up working and actually being a thing. If it references wolves too, you have other cards that are interesting, like Young Wolf is a card that plays nicely in there. You could I mean, I don't know if a 1/1 for 1 that has Undying really actually sees play, but maybe. I mean, it comes back to 2/2. It's like a good 1-drop.
I mean, if you do it as Jund, you can also play, what's it called to go infinite? Right, with Yawgmoth.
Yes.
So like Young Wolf Yawgmoth goes infinite, so you have that as an option as a sack outlet. So there's cool stuff you can do there. I also just I think this card's like on the edge of playable anyways. I agree. The next mechanic that was added it's the last returning mechanic, and that is Investigate. Investigate is back, as shown with Secrets of the Key, which show Arlencord and Teferi trying to research what's going on with the moon. But for 1 blue, you can investigate. And then, for 1 blue, you can investigate. And then from your graveyard with Flashback, for 3 and a blue, you can investigate twice.
Yeah, this card's definitely sweet. I thought it was really good right when I first saw it. That was my initial instinct, but then I remembered that cracking clues cost mana. Sure. And so I was like, okay. So like, I was like, yeah, like this is sweet. Like definitely it's good. And then I was like, flashback for 4, but that also means like the flashback is going to cost you 8 mana to draw 2 cards over like a couple turns, which is, I mean, because it's split up is not so bad.
The way to look at this is it's very similar to me to Think Twice. I think it's worse than Think Twice, but I think it's really close. I think it's different enough where in some ways it's better, right? Getting a clue token is better in some ways than 1 blue clue token is better than 3 mana draw a card, right? Like inherently, because the artifact token is usable, like it can be valuable later. And then 2, go.
No, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you.
Yeah, and 2 with Think Twice. Remember, Think Twice was 2 mana, draw a card, 3 mana, draw a card from your graveyard. This is 3 mana, draw a card, and then flashback, get the 2 clue tokens, and then over turns, cast them, draw a card, 2 cards. So you get 3 cards for 1 card. The last bit that I think is also interesting is it's all segmented at instant speed.
That's what I was going to say, that it makes sense to me when I think about this card and I compare it to other things that have existed. Because one of the things that Magic Design is very clear about and has been very clear about is that they like to design they like to design triggers. And especially they have been designing tons of creatures and tons of permanents that are, whenever you do this, this happens. They've been doubling and tripling down on this the last few years. You have so many creatures that have prowess or something like a prowess effect, or when an artifact comes into play, this happens. And in my opinion, in my experience, that's some of my favorite types of cards. Like I adore, for instance, playing that 1/3 for 2 in red, that whenever an artifact comes in, it deals 1 to each opponent. I've played that card for years. So the idea that like this is a spell that then I can cast as a second spell that's also going to get me artifact tokens, that's also going to draw me cards, that's also at instant speed, it's checking a lot of those boxes. It's checking the instant or sorcery box and the artifact comes into play box and the something during your opponent's turn box. It's a lot of different things where I think twice maybe is better, but doesn't do all of those things. It doesn't accomplish the same thing.
The fact that like Affinity can play this card or an Urza deck can play this card, and it's like a good card filtering effect that lets you draw on the cards you need, that also is good with Emery because you can self-mill this into your graveyard, that also just puts artifacts into play that trigger all the things that want to have artifacts into play, is like, I think good enough. I think this card's like definitively modern playable and maybe even like very, very good. Cause like drawing 3 cards for 1 card is already good. And the fact that it's so segmented at instant speed where you could just literally like cast this on turn 1, have a clue in your hand, then just hold counter magic up. And then when they don't do anything, sack the clue token, draw a card on turn 4 when they don't do anything, or cryptic command them, or cast this for 4, get 2 clue tokens, untap, keep cryptic command up. If they don't do anything again, sack your 2 clue tokens, get the 2, like, right? Like it feeds into itself in a really good mana pattern.
Feels like the kind of card that's going to end up showing up. Like if we're watching coverage in 1 year of blue-white control at a high-level modern tournament, if we're watching coverage and you see like the pro player, and I'm guaranteed in standard there'll be a blue-white control deck that's doing exactly this, but in standard, in modern, if we're watching as that pro sits there with his full grip and it's like end of turn, recast this, end of turn, crack a clue, end of turn, crack another clue, like that just feels like what the good players are doing. That strikes me so obviously as the card that's going to enable that. So yeah, it is probably better than we're thinking.
Like I kind of want to say that of all of the cards previewed today, this is the best card.
It's debatably. I don't disagree with you. It definitely stood out to me when I read it.
Maybe, no, I don't think anything comes like close. So beyond that, I'm really just excited for Clues. I think Clues is one of the cooler mechanics. It's my favorite of the like different. It's like kind of the perfect middle point where treasures are just like now very, very much everywhere. One thing I do hope is maybe just Clues could become eternal, like just bring Clues back forever. I think Investigate just is a mechanic that like treasures or like food should just exist. Maybe it's not called Investigate, but just Clues are back. So that's cool. And so that's the end of returning mechanics. Next, we have a returning character that has one of the new mechanics, and that is Sigarda, Champion of the Light. I'm going to read what the card does because we have audio-only listeners. 1 green, white, legendary creature angel. Shout out to you guys and friends. If you want to leave a review on any podcast app, it is appreciated. Sigarda Champion of the Light is 1 green, white for 4/4 flying trample legendary creature angel. Humans you control get +1/+1. And that has the ability Coven, which is a new mechanic. Whenever Sigarda attacks, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a human creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. Now, before we get into like Sigarda, let's talk about the mechanic Coven. Basically, what Coven is if you have 3 creatures with different powers effect. It's like Metalcraft or whatever. It changes what that effect is. There was a Coven card. One of the commanders was leaked. It was there was an actual physical card accidentally in a pack from the Forgotten Realms, and so we've known the Coven mechanic. And I absolutely thought powers was referring to some mechanic in the set, and not the power of power and toughness on a creature.
Yeah,
for 3 months. And even today, reading it until someone else talked about one of these cards and what they did, I was like, oh, it's that power, not like. Honestly, I thought for a second that it was like, oh, like, is it like keywords? Is it like trample is a power? Is that what they're going to like? Is it like the party mechanic? And then no, it's just the power of creatures, which makes it significantly better because it means this is a feasible thing to happen versus if it was like the party mechanic, which was like humans with these keywords count or something, which is what I thought it was going to be. But here we are with this mechanic. I think Sigarda, this Sigarda is very, very much feels like a standard, like pushed thing, a human lord that has flying and trample as a 4/4 for 4, I think is like definitely meant to be it. From a story perspective, it's cool. Like, do you know the story with like what Sigarda is and like how this all fits?
No, I mean, I used to love Sigarda Host of Herons, the original Sigarda, and I liked the second one enough, but this one's really good. So
Innistrad originally had 4 basically like goddess angels, one white and another color, right? There was Gisela, Bruna, Sigarda, and then the black-white one, which was in Commander Legends, which I am not remembering the name of. Lysa, the Shroud of Dusk. And then Sorin shows up, old Walker Soren, and I was like, I want to go gallivanting around, but my dad's made a lot of really scary vampires, and then there's these werewolves, and like now there's zombies, and I don't want to deal with this, so I'm gonna make a god angel to like deal with this. And so he makes Avacyn, and Avin shows up, sees the four like at this point the head honcho angels, and is like, ooh, you have black mana as part of your color pie, F you, murders Lysa, and then there's the three of them. And now, because of the happenstance of Avacyn Restored, Soren killed Avacyn, or not Avacyn Restored, because of Shadows of Innistrad, Soren killed Avacyn, and the other two angels smushed into one super horror monster that was terrifying. So Sigarda is all that's left, and she's now the head of what was Avacyn's church. Like, all of the humans, like a lot of the humans had a lot of their magic came directly from Avacyn. That's why you have like Avacyn's church was to Innistrad fighting vampires the way like Christianity is the way to fighting vampires in modern day society, right?
Okay,
like a cross kills a werewolf or a vampire. Avacyn's like little collar would do that. Sigarda's symbol, which is a heron, which is like a bird type of thing, is now that in this story. And that's why like all of the humans are like doing this more like harvesty witch coven situation, because it's a lot more of like her type of magic, which is coven-y fall-esque experiences. She's
good, but she's got some witchy evilness in her somewhere.
I think witches here are definitely being like more aligned with the good guys.
Okay, got it.
I think no, she's the good person, like right. She's the human lord, and will be on their side.
Usually is. That's what I always thought. But yeah, so okay, so good, a good witch.
Remember, because Avacyn wasn't evil until Nahiri showed up and made her go evil. She was just like aggro, maybe like not like a little too righteous in the like, I don't want any vampires to be alive. I would kill all of them if I could. Where like I feel like Sigarda is more on the like, as long as you guys are over there and don't mess with us, I won't mess with you. Is I think more the thing. But so that's she's back. Coven's a cool mechanic. We've seen a few different versions of it. It's definitely going to be. It feels a little bit of like the battle cry of this set, or kind of like the mechanic I'm gonna forget existed in 6 months, unless there's some card that's really powerful with it.
Battle Cry, that's right. I forgot about Battle Cry.
Or it's like attack with 3 creatures, bonus. Like, fine.
Yeah.
This is
What was that called? That was from like one of the Ravnica sets or something. 3 creatures.
Yeah.
Artillerize or something.
Wait, is that not Battle Cry?
No, isn't Battle Cry the +1/+0 for each other attacking creature when it attacks? Like that's what like Signal Pest has?
No, but Signal Pest is if you attack with 3 or more creatures, every creature gets. Yeah. It's when this creature attacks each other attacking. Oh, you're right. Yeah, I don't even remember.
Battle Cry was the one you're talking about. The one that was on like the red creature, Foundry Street Denizen, and like 3 or more creatures. I like can't remember what it's called now, but like definitely. Combat Medic or something had that on it, or
I'm thinking Battalion.
That was the
Battalion.
One.
Yeah. It was the yes. Yeah. Couldn't even remember what it was called, right? This feels like Battalion. Attack with 3 or more creatures, do this thing. This is if you have 3 or more creatures with. This is a lot easier to accomplish, so the benefits are going to be a lot easier to turn on. But we'll see. It definitely seems like the lower end. I think this is the last mechanic, but another mechanic revealed today, and this is one I'm really excited by, is Disturb. And this is, you have a double-sided card. You can cast one side, and it costs 1 and a blue. And then if it dies, or if it's in your graveyard, it has a Disturb cost, and you may cast this card from your graveyard, transformed for its Disturbed cost. So then you get the other side. So an example is Bait Hook Angler, which is a human peasant. For 1 and a blue, you make a 2/1. It has Disturb 1 and a blue. And then from your graveyard, you can cast it, and you get a Spirit, which is a 1/2 Spirit that if it would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So it's a flying 1/2 Spirit for 2. That's kind of like the lower. Like we got 2. We got another one that was a 0/4 wall for 1 and a white. And then for 4 and white, you get to bring it back, and it's a 4/4 Vigilance flying Spirit, right? So it's,
I think what's really interesting about that card is that like it, you've seen things. I mean, there's so many names like Return Dead, or I'm actually forgetting most of the names, but like those creatures that when they die, you can repeatedly find ways to get them back. And I know this isn't quite that, because obviously it comes back as a different creature, and then if it dies in that context, it goes away forever. Mm-hmm. But those decks also are usually all about looping things, returning things to hand. And like, so I can see a world in which you play this 2/1, you block with it, you recast it as a 1/2, and then you like do some sort of bounce it back to your hand thing, a creature that comes into play that returns it to your hand, you recast it. Especially in limited, if there's any effects like that in the set, if there's any kind of return something to your hand when you play it, this thing is going to be a menace when it comes to combat in limited. And I wouldn't even be shocked if there is some standard deck that takes advantage of that and is able to get lots and lots and lots of mileage out of it.
Yeah, and I think also part of it is like, if anything, that was maybe the flaw of both Innistrad sets. And the second Innistrad tried doing it with like pseudo flashback, where you have stuff like what's the 4-drop human that like comes back, Haunted Dead.
That's the one I was trying to remember the name.
Yeah. Where like you can bring it back, but like for a trope that is so much about creatures coming from the graveyard back to play, like Unearth was never in Innistrad, right? I'm actually and they like figured out a way like, oh, what's a cool way to do Unearth tropes? And spirits, like of the 4 main tribes of Innistrad, or 5 if you include humans, 6 if you include angels, 3 of
I knew it was coming. Don't cut that out. Leave that in.
3 of them, 3 of them are like literally the undead, right? Like humans die and spirits show up. Humans die and zombies happen. Humans die and become vampires.
Yeah.
And then humans become werewolves. They don't die, but like it's like humans transforming into thing. And now that we have this, I'm excited for Disturb to kind of like represent a lot of those tropes.
I do think one thing that's really funny, and we talked about this a second ago, but like I do notice this because I'm not sure if you've ever seen this. I recently watched Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Gary Oldman one from 1992, and it's so campy and ridiculous and over the top. It's so like difficult to watch on some level because it's like anyway. It's not a terrible movie, but it's just absurd, and it's so hammy. And like what you realize about the horror genre, about vampires and werewolves, and about a lot of this stuff is that there's a lot of B-movie comedy that goes into this genre that treatment is not given to the Dominaria Lord of the Rings world. That world doesn't really have the same camp factor that this world has. Like George A. Romero's entire career is largely built off of slightly campy zombie movies. You have like What We Do in the Shadows as a popular entity right now. You have so many things with ghosts and like that people love to laugh about this sort of thing. So I do think that it's funny when you talk about the stuff in here. There's an element to this stuff that I think people attach to beyond just is this cool or not?
Sure.
I think it's Stranger Things. You mentioned it. It's like it's very nostalgic and sort of funny and cool, quirky, I guess, in a way that a lot of that other stuff doesn't get to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like you get like the last set had 13 the last 2 sets had 13 as this major number mechanic. I'd be surprised if it doesn't show up here. One thing it's going to be interesting to see, like I would pay a lot of attention to what things from the first 2 Innistrad blocks aren't in this set, because I would be surprised if many of them aren't in the next one.
Well, so actually they previewed a little while ago. I think this was, or maybe this was today, but I thought this was a little bit ago. Triskaidekaphile, which was blue 1, human wizard 1/3. You have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 13 cards in your hand, you win the game.
Yes.
And for 4 mana, you can draw a card. So you do actually have the return of Triskaidekaphobia and Tree of Redemption and all those things.
Right. You're right. I definitely forgot, but that card definitely does exist. Yeah, so like it's going to be interesting to see what returns. Like for instance, I wouldn't be surprised if Madness just returns in the next set, in the vampire set.
Yeah.
Right? Like if we're getting flashback here, I don't know where else they'd bring Madness back, and that could just be the Madness set. So it'll be interesting to see what the differences between the 2 sets end up being, and that could be really cool, right? Because Madness and Flashback together make discard cards so valuable. So like the double feature is going to be really sweet. I'm hyped. The last mechanic before we wrap up the episode is Decay, and this is a thing that goes on creature tokens, and it's so far been featured almost exclusively on zombies, and it is a creature with Decay. Let me bring up the token because I just want to get it correctly.
The creature cannot block, and if it attacked this turn, you must sacrifice it at end of turn. So it's the cool idea. It goes into the Diagraph Ghoul territory of zombies that can't block, which is a standard piece of like that design. But then it's also fragile zombies that can't block that are often going to be created as tokens, it looks like. So it's the idea that you throw your useless zombie token at them and then it dies end of turn because it's decaying. cool, flavorful design. I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, they said it was either in Mark Rosewater's preview of what's in the set, or I think even Aaron Forsyth might have tweeted this, that they came up with a new mechanic for tokens that lets them push them a lot more. Like they're allowed to make token cards that are a little bit farther along in power level than they normally would, because they can make this like they don't block and they die if you attack with them. So they're almost like one-off effects. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited just to see the different effects. There's also cool stuff like there's an infinite combo already with Wilt Helt, the Rot Cleaver, 2 blue-black zombie warrior, 3/3 legendary creature. Whenever a zombie you controls dies, if it didn't have decay, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with decay. And then at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a zombie. If you do draw a card, is the blue-black commander from the commander product. And then that plus the Toy Maker card, Doll Stitcher. When you flip it, it has creature tokens you control lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may transform Toy Factory. So if you have a sack outlet, you can just keep sacking them, right? And you have an infinite sack outlet. It's a commander product, so I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. But so yeah, there's just like cool stuff with decay that like is fun to play with. I'm excited just to see what's pushed in general. Okay, so we have one last thing we need to talk about before the thing is done, before the episode is done. It's a small conversation about set boosters, and I just want to get your vibe on it because I know you don't know this. So, for the last couple of years in set boosters, you remember the difference between set boosters and draft boosters or whatever.
Yeah, of course. I was the idiot that bought I bought draft boosters instead of set boosters for Horizons. Yeah,
right. So set boosters have the commander precon that's associated with it sets inside, right? Like they include those cards, and that's where you can get like full art versions of those cards and stuff like that. For the first time, this set will have commander precon cards or commander cards that aren't standard legal in the set booster, but are also not in the commander precons.
Oh, so they're exclusive commander product cards that you can't get unless you open them in a commander.
Unless you open them in a set booster. They're only available in set boosters.
Because, for a second there, I was thinking Commander Legends happens every time, but it doesn't. It only happens when it happened the one time. So what it means is you either open these in a set of a standard set or you don't get them. That's it.
Correct.
So it's their clever marketing way to cross-pollinate, make Commander players buy standard boosters, and then get people who are in standard opening cards that are in Commander and feeling special and wanting to play Commander. That's the goal, it seems like.
I mean, people are insinuating that for sure.
Yes.
And those cards are Curse of Obsession, which is the 4 red aura curse. Enchanted player. At the beginning of enchanted player's draw step, that player draws 2 additional cards. At the beginning of enchanted player's end step, that player discards their hand. And then you have the flashback. This spell costs X less to cast this way, where X is the greatest mana value of the commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone cards. So that's there's a cycle of those: Visions of Ruin, Visions of Dominance, Visions of Duplicity, Visions of Dread, and Visions of Glory. And all of those will be only available in commander in set boosters. One cool thing is that Visions of Dominance shows a baby Gitrog. Because it's showing a vision of its future is its idea. It's either showing a baby Gitrog or it's showing a frog who has ambitions to become the next Gitrog, or like looks up to what it could be as the Gitrog, because it's a little baby frog on a lily pad looking into like a swamp and it's reflecting itself, but instead it's the Gitrog monster with like the arm coming out of its mouth.
Ambitions of a frog. I feel that.
It's I want to protect this little son with everything I am. Nothing bad should happen to this frog until it become the Gitrog. But that was like the drama today on Twitter, was that this was happening. I know a lot of people are unhappy about it. To me, I think this is fine. I think this is better than other versions of like exclusive to location product being printed. Like I think like the Buy a Box promo stuff that was happening is way worse. What's the 7 mana Time Walk? Oh,
Nexus of Fate.
Yeah, the Nexus of Fate situation was worse because you had like buy a box, and not every box you bought comes with that type of product. If like from a price perspective, the only person this hurts are people that just like buy every commander product, and so they'll always have one of every card that comes from it. That's the person that this is kind of affecting the most, because otherwise these cards are going to be way cheaper than any commander exclusive product. Like these will never be as expensive as a Dockside Extortionist, right? Even if they're that good,
because they'll get opened a million times. I mean,
correct.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Set booster product is open very heavily. There's a debate on how good of a thing that is, but it's regardless, that's what's happening. And because of that, any cards included in it are going to be more affordable than if they are just included in a commander precon.
Well, what about this question though? Do you don't get it as an additional card? It's still one of your cards in the pack, or is it an additional card that replaces like the rules?
No. It's an additional
token?
card in the pack.
It's an extra card.
Yeah.
Okay, so you open the pack.
No. It replaces your rare. If you open a pack and this is your rare, it's the rare.
See, I'm a little that's the situation that I probably have the biggest.
But that can
issue
happen
with.
already with other commander cards. Like
you
right
buy
now,
a standard set.
Right now in a set booster, if you buy a set booster, the cards from the associated commander product can show up in that slot. Let me rephrase when I say it can show up in one of the rare slots, but remember there's like 3 rare slots in a set booster, right? There's like the special rare that's going to be like foil or something unique. And I think that falls into that spot. And then there's your like standard rare that's always a rare from standard. And then there's like the third thing that can be like,
got it. Okay. So like a more of a flex spot. Okay. I guess I didn't realize that the corresponding commander thing was already happening. I missed that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's why if you bought like a set booster, because the one set booster you bought was Modern Horizons, where this wasn't true, right? Because there is no
corresponding
commander product. But for Strixhaven, for instance, like I have a bunch of like full art random commander only commander cards. Like I have a full art of the actual commanders. If you wanted full art or foils, you had to get them from set boosters.
Have set boosters made you more excited to open booster packs again?
Yeah. I actually really like this is a like hot take. I really like set boosters.
Yeah. That's cool.
I think they're like, I like opening packs. This is my complaint with set boosters. I don't like that I'm forced to gain them as my winnings when I win a pre-release. Right? That sucks because I have a bunch of cool, including Shadows over Innistrad packs, chaos boosters, and almost all of them are winnings from pre-releases from 5 years ago that I've just never opened.
Right. You've been holding on to them to draft. And so now
set boosters will never be that. I'm just going to open them. But they're better to open, especially when there's stuff like the Mystical Archive included.
For sure.
So it's a weird one. But
all right.
Yeah. So do you like set boosters?
I do. I mean, I think it's, I think I've opened 6 total set boosters in my whole life because they only really became a thing like just before pandemic or even maybe during pandemic now that I think about it. So the one time that I would have opened a box of them, I opened a box of draft boosters and then I opened collector's boosters. So I do think the design is cool though. I mean, I for sure feel like when you open a pack, you want to feel like you're getting something special instead of the draft problem, which is that a lot of what you open is just common regular printed chaff that you don't want. You just basically flip to the rare to see if it's good or not. And so, yeah, I think it's a good design for that reason.
There's one interesting thing, like uncommons are now worth more.
Oh, interesting.
There are less uncommons in set boosters than there are in regular packs because that uncommon slot is being more replaced by other kind of rarities of stuff. So like random one-shot uncommons have a higher chance of being valuable than they used to.
But not across the board because there's usually not really very many expensive uncommons in most sets. So
if a uncommon is heavily playable, it will be a problem that it will be more expensive now, just like across the board, right? Like if uncommons see play, they are going to be worth more than they used to be.
Fair enough.
Like if you see a uncommon that's going to be really good, pick up copies early because it could become like a $20 card. Speaking of which, no, Secrets of the Key is a common. Just talking about uncommons that we maybe saw that were new today. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much. Big shout out specifically to our patrons. Pinkies up to Patrick Davidson, who's in the Exalted tier. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And welcome to House Modern. Thank you all the other patrons. Definitely make sure to check that out. You get the whole episode a week early. We recorded this on Thursday. You get it on Friday. Normally record on Tuesday. You get it on Wednesday. Make sure to check out we're skipping this week tonight because of Memorial Day on the whole streaming. But normally it's every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. PST. And make sure to check out Battle Bosses, which is the game that I made. It's on Kess.co/Battle Bosses. It's available. We have copies of it. We're going to be at Gen Con. We're fulfilling Kickstarter backers first. So once those get out, but you can start pre-ordering it and it'll start coming out throughout October and September. As you know, it's a bunch of monsters fighting. It's Halloween. We talked about how cool monsters fighting are. So make sure to check that out. And if you're at Gen Con, I'll be there. make sure to say hi. We have a booth. You can look it up. Thank you so much, everyone. And Ben, anything you want to shout out before we finalize?
Yeah, thanks for watching and listening to another episode. A lot of you guys know I'm going on tour, which I'm very excited about. You can get tickets at benbateman2021tour.com. I've got my next single about to come out. And the thing this week, actually, when you're hearing this episode, that's especially cool, my co-host on Action Industries, Andrew Guy, and I did a podcast for a long time called Action Movie Anatomy. Alex was a guest on that show a few times. And it ended when the pandemic started. And we had been trying to figure out a way to replace it for a very long time. So we did. It launched this week. It's called The Best and the Worst. It's a show where we break down the best and the worst movie in a director or an actor or a franchise. We usually take like the rankings, like, oh, Rotten Tomatoes says this is the best 3, this is the worst 3. Are they in fact the best and worst? We go through all kinds of fun games to figure out the ranking. It's live right now on iTunes, on Spotify, on all the different places, and it's also on YouTube. So go check that out, The Best and the Worst. You'll just look that up in my name, you'll find it. But yeah, follow us, give us a review. We're really excited about it. That'll be coming out weekly. So
nice, congratulations. All right, thanks everyone. We'll talk to you all next week.
Bye guys.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.